Some of you remember 1984, the Olympics were in Los Angeles. And if you watched those Olympics, I did, you probably remember the story of Gabby Anderson. Gabby Anderson was a marathon runner from Switzerland. And she wasn't like a top finisher, but she was a good runner. And at the Olympic marathon, as she was finishing the race, she missed the final hydration station. So by the time she got to the stadium, she was really starting to go into dehydration. And if you remember that Olympics, when they ran the marathon, they got into the stadium, and then they had to run several laps around. And the world watched as this runner entered the stadium, clearly in distress. She was limping along. She could hardly stay on her feet. Her muscles were spasming. Her body was going in and out of convulsions. And nobody was really sure if she would finish. But she stubbornly kept going, and she finished the race. And it was Gabby Anderson's stubborn refusal to quit that made her an Olympic hero. A few months later, in October of the same year, Rich the Goose Gossage was on the mound in the World Series. He pitched for the San Diego Padres, and his team was in the World Series. It was Game 5. His team was trailing 3-1, so they had to win. And in this moment, his team was in trouble. He had to get an out. And up to the plate came Kirk Gibson. And so Gossage's manager put up 4 fingers. He said, "I want you to walk this guy." And Gossage looked at his manager and said, No, I want to pitch to him. And the manager said, "No, I want you to walk him 4 pitches." And Gossage said, "No, I'm going to pitch to him." So the manager came running out to the mound, and they started to have this dialogue. "You got to walk him. He's a dangerous hitter." And Gossage said, "No, I'm going to strike him out." And in fairness to Goose Gossage, every time he had faced Kirk Gibson in their careers, he had struck him out. So he had some history to say, "I'm going to strike this guy out." In fact, a little piece of trivia, Kirk Gibson's very first major league at bat was against Goose Gossage several years earlier. And Gossage struck him out on 3 pitches. And so Goose says, "Hey, I'm going to strike this guy out." And the manager finally says, "Well, you're being stubborn, so I'm going to let you pitch to him." And Goose Gossage got to throw 1 pitch to Kirk Gibson, because Gibson hit that pitch over the wall for a 3-run homer. And the Detroit Tigers won the game and the 1984 World Series. And it was Goose Gossage's stubborn refusal to follow the plan that cost his team the game and the World Series. You see, sometimes stubborn can be good, and sometimes stubborn can be bad. And I know that you think when you're stubborn, it's good, right? Like for me, well, when I'm stubborn, it's good. You know, I'm only stubborn about the right things. But everybody around you, like your kids, when they're stubborn, that's bad. Yeah, your spouse, that's bad stubborn, but my stubborn is good stubborn. Let me give you maybe an easy way to think about this, all right? So your stubborn is not good stubborn unless it is aligned with Jesus' stubborn. And here's where you get a little bit uncomfortable, right? Whoa. We can't call Jesus stubborn, right? Jesus is meek and mild. He's, kind and loving and compassionate. Jesus was never stubborn, was he? Well, actually, the Bible says he was. So if you have your Bible, you can open it to Luke chapter 9, or you can pull it up on your phone or your tablet. We'll put the verse up here on the screen. And today we're going to drill down on one verse in this chapter, verse 51 of Luke chapter 9. It says this: "When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem." Now, that expression, "set his face," that means he was stubborn. It kind of means like this stubborn commitment or a resolution or a focus, that Jesus was determined to go to Jerusalem. Now, there's some clues about why right here in the verse. It says, "When the days drew near for him to be taken up." And there's 3 different ways that Luke might have meant that, and maybe all 3 apply. One, he might have been talking about Jesus' death, because Jesus was taken up on a cross. He might have been talking about Jesus' resurrection, because he was taken up from the grave. And he might have been talking about Jesus' ascension, which came several weeks later when Jesus was taken up into heaven. It doesn't really matter. The point that Luke is making is Jesus' completion of his ministry is in focus. Jesus can see the finish line, and now he is laser focused on getting there, and nothing is going to keep him from getting there. Now understand this. When Jesus talks about Jerusalem, he's actually talking about the cross. So when Luke says Jesus' face was set on Jerusalem, what he means is that Jesus' face was set on the cross. And in fact, if you read the rest of this chapter, you see that really clearly. If you go back to verse 22, here Jesus is talking to his disciples. And he says, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed on the third day and be raised. So he said, look, Jesus says, I'm going to Jerusalem. Here's what that means. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be rejected. And I'm going to be killed. But don't worry, I'm going to rise again. Which makes me say, why is it that the disciples were so afraid when Jesus died? Because he told them he was going to rise again. And the reason is because they weren't listening. If you go down a couple of verses, this was a few days later, Jesus is up on top of a mountain. And he's there with Peter, James, and John. And this is one of those really miraculous moments in the Bible. When just for a moment, Peter, James, and John got a glimpse of who Jesus really was, that he's actually God. And in this moment, miraculously, Elijah and Moses appear with Jesus. Listen to what it says. This is verse 30. It said, and behold, two men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, or his death, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. So again, here's everything's looking ahead to Jerusalem, and everything's looking ahead to Jesus' death. Now, one more verse. This is a few days after that. Jesus has just healed a boy, and now he's talking to his disciples again, because they're all excited. Yeah, this is great. Things are going really well. And this is what Jesus says in verse 44. He says, let these words sink into your ears. That's a great phrase. So parents, maybe grab onto that, write it down. This is good for your kids, right? Hey, let these words sink into your ears. Because what Jesus is saying here is, listen up, guys, you're not paying attention. Focus on me. Look, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. Jesus is saying, we're going to Jerusalem. Nothing's going to stop us. We're going to Jerusalem. And when we get there, they're going to kill me. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Why was Jesus so stubborn about doing something he knew would be painful? Like, I can be stubborn sometimes, right? But generally, the things I'm stubborn about are the things that are going to feel good, right? Like so tonight, we're going to go get ice cream at the Whip-de-Doo because I love the Lucky Charms Whip-de-Whirl. And if Mary Ann says to me, we don't have time, I'm going to be stubborn about it. And if she says, David, you've already had too much to eat today, I'm going to be stubborn about it because it tastes good. Now, I don't know if we actually will or not. But you understand this, right? When we're stubborn, it's because it's for something we want that's going to feel good to us. Generally, we're not stubborn about suffering, right? You know, if you do that, David, it's going to hurt really bad. Okay, I won't do it. I'm not going to be stubborn about pain. But Jesus is stubborn about suffering. He's stubborn about something that's going to lead to his death. Why? One of the reasons is because Jesus understood that this was God's plan from the very beginning. So we have to go all the way back to Genesis, all right? And in Genesis, God creates this perfect world where everything functions exactly as it's supposed to. And then Adam and Eve make a decision that rather than do what God told them to do, they're going to do things their own way. And as a result, everything breaks. Because honestly, God knows how the world is supposed to function. And so he lays out for us, hey, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. If you do what you should, don't do what you shouldn't, actually life's going to go a little bit better. Adam and Eve say, we're going to do it our way, and everything gets off the rails. And so in Genesis 3, God comes to talk to them, to kind of explain, hey, look, you guys messed up. and here are the results of that. And he explains that one of the results of allowing evil into the world is relational dysfunction. He said, you guys are going to spend your lives trying to control each other. And isn't that what's at the root of most relational dysfunction? Whether it be one-on-one or in groups or in politics or in international politics, it's people trying to control each other. And God said, you guys let evil into the world, and now this is the result. You're going to try to control each other, relational dysfunction. He said, this world isn't going to function the way it once did. You know, the earth isn't going to work for you as easily as it should. There's going to be natural disasters. There's going to be famines. There's going to be storms. This is all a part of this new world. And then he talks to Eve. And he's talking to Eve and the serpent at the same time. The serpent is the one that deceived them. It's Satan. And he's talking to Eve, and he starts to talk to Eve about her offspring. Right? Like, Eve, I want you to look off in the distance. Because in the distance, many, many generations removed from here, you're going to have a descendant. And your descendants, Eve, they're going to be at odds with snakes. That's what he says. By the way, I love this because I am at odds with snakes. Everybody should hate snakes. If you don't hate snakes, you're probably a psychopath. Maybe that's a little harsh. I don't like snakes. And it's because God said we're not supposed to. If you're a descendant of Eve, and that's all of us, if you're a descendant of Eve, you shouldn't like snakes. But that's not really the main point. So God says, look, way off in the future, Eve, this descendant of yours is going to be at odds with the snake. That's Satan. And the snake is going to bite his heel. So this is God actually thousands of years earlier prophesying the cross. When Jesus gets to the cross and Satan works through the hearts and the minds and the actions of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin and the Romans to crucify Jesus, this is the moment when the serpent bites the heel of Eve's descendant. And Satan thinks he's won. But 3 days later, something else happens, and God prophesied that too. He said, look, the serpent will bite the heel of your offspring, but he will crush the head of the serpent, which means that Jesus will rise again, and he will defeat evil forever. This is why Jesus had to go to the cross. You see, Jesus went to the cross to defeat evil forever. Let me show you how that works for you, all right? Because we all live in this world that doesn't function the way it's supposed to function. You experienced that this week, didn't you? Something went on in your life this week, and you probably said, it shouldn't be like this. Or maybe you saw a story on the news, and you said, it shouldn't be like this. These kinds of things shouldn't happen. And I want you to understand, all of this is a part of living in a broken world. A world that has turned its back on God. A world that refuses to live the way he says we should live. A world that refuses to avoid the things he says we should avoid. And as a result, everything is broken. And on a very personal level, we are broken too. And you experienced this week, didn't you? That all of us make mistakes. All of us fall short of our own standards, let alone God's standards. And we call this sin, right? Sin is when we fall short of what God has said we should be. And that's all of us. The problem with sin is that it separates us from God. You see, God is sinless. He's perfectly holy. He's perfectly righteous. And when God, in all of his glory, is in the presence of sin, he is an all-consuming fire. Because sin cannot stand in the presence of holiness. It's like water and fire, right? That if you put water on fire, one of them is not going to stick around. This is God and sin. And so what that means for me personally is if I'm carrying sin in my life, if I have sin on my account, and trust me, I do, when I step out of this world and into eternity, there's no room for me in the presence of God. Because my sin can't be in his presence. And so the penalty for my sin is separation from God. So when Jesus went to the cross, God took my sin, God took your sin, God took all of the sin of all people for all time, and he placed it on his son. It was like a transferring of accounts. And when all of the sin of all of the world of all time was placed on the shoulders of Jesus, in that moment, God the Father separated from God the Son. And Jesus cried out, "Why have you forsaken me?" See, he took upon himself my separation, and then he died. He took upon himself my physical separation, so that I am no longer guilty of my sin. I no longer have to carry the guilt of my sin, which means I no longer have to carry the shame of my sin. And so my mistakes of the past, God's wiped them away. My sins, God's gotten rid of them. He said, I'm not holding you to those, David. And get this, this is awesome. If God has forgiven me, guess who else should forgive me? Me. So please hear this. If you're living in the past today, if you're living in a place full of shame because you know you're guilty, you know you've made mistakes, you know you've done things you wish you had done, if you're living there today, you don't have to. Jesus set his face on the cross so you wouldn't have to. So he took care of the penalty for us, but he did more than that. He also gave us power over sin. You see, there's still sin in the world. It's all around us, and there's still temptations. We still deal with that all the time. But now, because I have a clean record with God, he sent God the Holy Spirit to live with me, to live in me, to guide me, to empower me, so that when I find myself in these places where I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do that, I now have the power of God in me to conquer that sin. So God the Son takes care of the penalty of my sin. God the Spirit gives me power over sin, also that in eternity I can be free of the presence of sin. Because now, when I step out of this world and into the next, and I stand before God, the righteous judge, and he looks at me and he says, "Do you have any sin on your account?" I don't have to say a word. Because Jesus will speak up for me. And Jesus will say, he's clean, he's one of mine. And God will say, welcome home, child. And I will live for eternity in the presence of God, where there is no more sin, no more sadness, no more suffering, no more death, no more illness, none of that. It's all gone because of the work of Jesus. So why was Jesus stubborn about going to the cross? Because he wanted to secure all of that for me. Because here's the thing. Jesus loves me. And he loves you. And the reason Jesus was stubbornly focused on going to Jerusalem and on going to the cross was because of his love for you. You see, we all understand that love is measured in sacrifice. When you truly love someone, you will do anything for them. And the greatest love is demonstrated in the greatest sacrifice. And so Jesus' sacrifice for me is the greatest sacrifice of all time, because Jesus' love for me is greater than anyone else's. And Jesus' love for you is greater than anyone else's. That's why in Romans 5:8, Paul writes, "But God shows his love for us, and that while we were still sinners," so while we're still messed up, while we're still broken, while we don't deserve it and we cannot earn it, God shows his love for us through Jesus' death. So Jesus is focused on the cross. He's stubborn about getting to the cross because of his great love for us. And understand, it wasn't easy for him to get there. This is Luke chapter 9 that we're looking at right now. The cross doesn't come until chapter 23. So there's a lot of work that Jesus has to do between here and then. And there's a lot of opportunity for him to be distracted. And in fact, Satan and the powers of evil would have liked nothing more than to see him distracted from this mission. And so they threw difficulties at him. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, they came, they argued with him, they tried to turn the people against him, they accused him of all manner of things because they wanted the difficulties of life to distract Jesus from his mission. But Jesus was resolute. And there was no difficulty that was going to distract him from the cross. Satan tried another tactic with him. He tried to make things easy for Jesus. Remember when Satan was tempting Jesus in the wilderness? He said, look, Jesus, you know what? You can bypass all that pain. You can bypass all that suffering. Just worship me. right? Just skip out on all of that. Take the easy way out. No pain, no suffering. And you know what? I'll give you all the kingdoms of this world. It would have been so easy for Jesus to be distracted from the cross, to not be stubborn about the cross because it was so easy. And I wonder if sometimes this isn't the tool that gets us too. Because I think sometimes it's when it's easy to go through life that it's also easy to be distracted. Have you ever found yourself forgetting about God, forgetting about Jesus, getting off of his mission because life is just so easy? I mean, it just feels like I don't need him, but not Jesus. Satan tried ease, he tried difficulties, and Jesus pressed on. He stayed focused on the cross because Jesus understood that faithfulness is not measured in this moment. Faithfulness is measured in the next moment, and the moment after that, and the moment after that. As Jesus took step after step after step towards Jerusalem and towards the cross. And our faithfulness is the same. Our faithfulness is measured not in this moment, but in the next, and the next, and the next, as we take one step at a time following the mission of Jesus. See, Jesus' face was set on Jerusalem. His face was set on the cross for the sake of his disciples. And what he wanted from them was for them to set their face on him. You see, Jesus actually wanted them to join them in his mission. If you keep reading to the end of chapter 9 and you just roll right into chapter 10, this is what happens in verse 1. It says, after this, the Lord appointed 72 others. So these are 72 of Jesus' closest followers. And he sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. So Jesus is headed to Jerusalem, but on the way, he is going to stop in every town and village he can so that he can get his message of love and forgiveness to as many people as possible. And in order to prepare for that, he takes his followers and sends them out ahead, and he gives them a mission. You can read the rest of chapter 10 to see what the mission is. Let me summarize it for you. He says this, your mission is to point people to me. He says, go out, point people to me. But then he warned them, when you do this, there will be opposition. There will be people who reject the message. There will be people who don't want to hear it. So you're going to take this message about me out there. You're going to point people to me. There will be some who oppose you, but Jesus says, I want you to respond with grace. I don't want you to fight back. I don't want you to argue. I don't want you to play the victim. If they oppose you, if they reject you, just keep moving. Just keep taking the next step. Go find someone else and point them to me. That was Jesus' mission. You see, here's what he was saying to his disciples. My face is set on the cross. That's my mission. And I want you to join me there. Look at chapter 9, verse 23. This is where Jesus is trying to help his disciples understand what's coming. And he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Jesus says, I want you to lose your ambitions. I want you to lose your plans for the future, and I want you to join me in mine. Jesus is saying to the disciples, look, this is my mission. Join me here. Now, Marianne and I have season passes to the Cincinnati Zoo. I think that's just what old people do, is right? You go to the zoo and you just walk around and look at the animals, and we're old, so that's what we do. We like the hippos. I mean, the hippos are kind of awesome, right? They're big and they're floating around in the water and they eat those big things of lettuce. I think they're really cool. It was kind of interesting in the second service, so that's the last service. I was in the middle of talking about this, and somebody sent me this picture on my phone. It says, did you know that hippos would kill about 500 people every year? Still think I'm cute? I had no idea. But yeah, I still think they're kind of cute, so I guess. So anyway, so we like the hippos. We also, at the zoo, like to ride on the train. I love riding on the train. One of the things we discovered, though, is that your season pass doesn't mean you have a train pass. And so you actually have to pay extra for the train. So this year, when we got our season passes, we upgraded. So we have the train pass now. That means we can ride the train anytime we want. So imagine we go to the zoo, and we get in the gates, and I say to Marianne, hey, let's go ride the train. She's like, okay. I know I sound like I'm 3, but this is just boys like trains, okay? So I'm like, let's go ride the train. So we get in line, and we wait in line, and we get all the way to the front of the line, and I say to the conductor, hey, can you take us to the hippos? And he says, this train doesn't go to the hippos. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm a season pass holder. So can you take us to the hippos? He said, sir, the train doesn't go to the hippos. I'm like, well, hold on. Maybe you don't understand where I'm coming from. I'm a season pass holder, and see, look right here, I'm a train pass holder. So let's go to the hippos. And he's like, sir, I can't take you to the hippos because this train doesn't go to the hippos. And I'm getting a little bit frustrated, right? Because this guy's not understanding. So I kind of stomp my foot for effect. I'm like, listen, dude, take me to the hippos. And he says, no, you listen, dude. I don't think you understand trains. You see, trains run on tracks. And the tracks are actually attached to the ground. And they don't move and they don't change. And the train can only go where the tracks are. And these tracks don't go to the hippos. So if you want to ride the train, you can go where the tracks lead. But if you want to see the hippos, you can't go on the train. This is what Jesus is saying to the disciples. Look, guys, I'm going to Jerusalem. That's where my tracks lead. I'm going to the cross. Now, if you want to go with me, you got to go to the cross. But if you want to go somewhere else, you're going to have to go without me. You see, we all want Jesus to be part of our life. But what that means is I can't expect him to change his mission to match up with my ambition. I have to change my direction to match his mission. Let this sink into your ears, okay? Because this isn't easy. Jesus' mission for you does not mean you're always going to be healthy. Jesus' mission for you might not include wealth. Being popular is not the focus of Jesus' mission for you. Now, that doesn't mean those things won't happen. They might. But if your ambition is perfect health, you're not on Jesus' train. If your ambition is getting wealthy and having a lot of stuff, that's not where Jesus is going. If your ambition is to be super popular, that's not the cross. Now here's the thing. Jesus might make you healthy. He might give you great health. I hope he does. But if he does, understand the reason he has made you healthy is so that you can join him in his mission. Jesus might give some of you wealth. I hope he does, and I hope you give some of it to the church. But the reason he gives you wealth is not so you can buy whatever you want, but so that you can invest in his mission. Jesus might make you popular, but the reason he does is so that you can use your influence for him. You see, Jesus wants us to realize that my ambitions die at the cross. If I take up my cross, my ambitions die so that I can join him in his mission. Now, here's the cool thing. If Jesus is going to give us instructions about our mission, it would be exactly what he said to the disciples, right? When he was sending them out to go village to village. Look, you have a mission, and it's to point people to me. And if you do that, there will be opposition. There are going to be people who disagree with you. There will be people who reject your message. That's okay. Meet that rejection. Meet that opposition with grace. Don't fight back. Don't make a big scene. Don't go to war. Don't play the victim. Just simply move on and continue to be faithful, pointing other people to Jesus. But that wasn't the end. You see, after Jesus told them all that, he also said this: if you do it, there will be good results. Check this out. This is chapter 10, verse 2. Jesus says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Now, when we hear this word harvest, it brings to mind fields, right? And the idea of harvest is it's time, right? Everything is done. Everything is ready. The harvest is set to go. You just have to go out and get it. That's what harvest means. That's what Jesus is saying. Everything is ready. People are ready. They want to hear this message. Just go out and get them. Imagine a farmer standing out on his back porch looking out over his fields, and he says, you know what? It's time. The harvest is ready. So he calls out to his family. Family, it's time to harvest. We're going to get up bright and early tomorrow and start working in the fields. But since I know it's going to be a long day and you're going to work hard, tonight we're going into town and we're going to have a nice dinner together. So the family loads up in the old pickup truck. They start heading into town, and as they get into town, they see this big green sign that says Ponderosa. And the farmer says, let's go there. Now, some of you have never been to Ponderosa. Some of you don't know what Ponderosa is. Google it real quick. You'll want to know. All right? Farmer and his family have never been to a Ponderosa, but it looks kind of cool. So they go in, and their eyes get big when they see the feast that awaits them. These big, massive, long tables full of food. It's an unbelievable buffet. Now, by the way, I have a close connection with Ponderosa. So my wife actually worked at Ponderosa in Kettering while we were in college. So there would be times I'd come and see her on the weekends, and my roommate in college actually worked at the Ponderosa in Xenia, which was awesome because whenever they had leftover chicken wings, he would bring them home. So like our senior year, we lived on Ponderosa chicken wings. And I don't know if you remember the Ponderosa chicken wings, but oh, they are something. And so the farmer and his family, they go up to the buffet, and the son, he's like filling his plate with chicken. And he comes back, and he's like, Dad, did you see all this chicken? They got chicken wings, and they got chicken tenders, and chicken nuggets, and baked chicken, and broiled chicken, and all kinds of chicken. He's like, Dad, I think they got so much chicken here, we probably don't need to raise chickens anymore. And the daughter says, yeah, but Dad, look at all this corn I have. They got regular corn, they got sweet corn, they got corn on the cob, they got cornbread, they got cream corn, they got corn casserole. They got so much corn, Dad. I don't think we need to harvest the corn this year. And the mom says, yeah, look at my plate. I got all this bread. They've got these delicious rolls, and they got all these different kinds of bread. They got this raisin bread, all with that frosting on it. So good. They got bread pudding. She said, honey, I think they've got so much bread here, we probably don't need to harvest the wheat this year. And the farmer says, I think you're all right. I've never seen so much food in my whole life. There's enough food here for us to eat forever, and they just keep bringing it. We don't have to leave ever again. Family, we're going to stay here. Forget the harvest. We're going to fill our bellies. Now, we would all say, yeah, that's problematic, right? Sure, you're going to be full. You can eat everything you want. The buffet is going to be there. But if you don't harvest the crops, there's a lot of people who are going to go hungry. And Jesus is saying to us, there's a harvest out there of people who are going to go hungry. They're missing out on the most important truths of life if you don't go out and tell them. You see, sometimes I worry that we church folk, we totally miss the great harvest because we're so focused on eating the buffet that we already have. And Jesus says, my face is set on the cross because I want to save as many people as I can. And I want you to have your face set on me so that you can point as many people as possible back to me. So this is why our challenge is what it is. So every month this year we have a different challenge, and this month our challenge is 2 parts. You get to pick your own adventure. You can either take part 1 or part 2. Part 1 of our challenge is this. Invite 10 people to join you at the gathering this month. Now, I know if you invite 10 people, they're not all going to come. You're going to face opposition. Some of them will reject you. That's okay. Meet it with grace and move on, right? But invite 10 people to join you at the gathering this month. That's the first challenge. If you don't like that one, you can try the second one. It's this. Give at least 3 invitations every week for the whole month. So it's kind of similar. This time it's just 3 per week, and they may or may not come, but you might invite the same 3 people every week until they come, which if that's what you want to do, that's great. Now, I know some of you might be saying, Dave, why make such a big deal about inviting people to church? Let me see if I can, as much as possible, share my heart as to why we emphasize inviting people to church. I believe that the message we have is the most important message that anyone could ever hear. Like I believe that the truths of this book can change a life. They've changed mine. I know they've changed many of yours. And so we want as many people as possible to experience the life-changing truth that Jesus brings. And that begins if they come here, because we can share it with them. Beyond that, I want as many people as possible to experience the freedom of giving their guilt and shame to Jesus. And I know that if they come here, they're going to hear that message. And that's why, for me, it's so important that we say, hey, we want as many people as possible to experience what Jesus has done for us. And so we want to invite as many people as possible. We want to connect as many people as possible to Jesus. That's his mission for us. We want to see the harvest. We don't want to just sit here and eat at the buffet. We want to share it. And so, look, this morning, we had almost 100 people show up at 8:15, so there'd be some empty seats in this service. Now, there's not as many as I'd hope. Some of y'all need to come a little earlier, all right, 9:30. You know what? I know some of you missed out on donuts this morning. Lesson learned, plenty of donuts at 9:30, all right? But here's the point. Those people came early this morning, so there'd be more seats here, so we could invite more people, so more people can meet Jesus, so more people can be changed. That is worth getting up early for. And that's worth offering an invitation for. Jesus set his face on the cross for you. Will you set your face on him? Let's pray.